Good Tuesday morning. I'm Jake Sherman, one of the founders of Punchbowl News. Thanks so much for joining us in person, on the live stream, on C-SPAN, anywhere else you're watching, for our conversation with House Transportation and Infrastructure Chairman Sam Graves of Missouri. We'll talk a bit about news of the day, FEMA reform, and the role that the federal government plays in disaster response and recovery. A big thank you to the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association for partnering with us on this event. After my conversation with Mr. Graves, I will be joined by Jim Matheson, CEO of the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, who is a classmate of Mr. Graves, is in the house, class of 2000. As always, you can find Punchbowl News on all social media platforms at Punchbowl News. We encourage you to share the conversation. Please welcome Chairman Sam Graves to the stage. All right, Mr. Graves, thank you very much. We're gonna start with a few news of the day questions in your world, and there's a lot in your world right now, and we'll get to the highway bill, which is coming up in somewhat short order, at least potentially. But let's talk about air traffic control and the shutdown. Give us a sense, I'm sure you're in touch with DOT and all the relevant stakeholders, give us a sense of what is going on with air traffic control, how bad it is, and how bad it could get. And I should say Mr. Graves is a pilot, so this is something he knows.
Yeah, thank you. Which, by the way, I do want to say thanks for having me
Thank you.
on. And I'm glad to be sitting here as chairman of the Transportation Committee, despite your predictions on the waiver.
Oh, right, yeah. I knew I'd get trouble for that. Well, listen.
I'm glad you didn't have a vote on the steering committee.
Well, listen, I will say, I just listen to what people tell me and I report it. I'm happy you're chairman. It's glad to have you here.
So, is the airspace safe? Absolutely, it's safe. Are we going to have delays? Absolutely, and they're probably going to get worse. It's not so much. What happened is it's just exacerbated the problem that we have, and that's the fact that we are short thousands of air traffic controllers.
Right.
We just don't have the personnel. Then you throw the not getting paid and the extra stress of that on top of it. It just makes it that much worse. And so the easy thing to do is just pass a clean CR. Let's get the government back open, start negotiating, and get people paid again. But the delays are gonna get worse.
And where does this leave, the president, I should say, for background, has talked a lot, and probably more than any other president in recent memory, about air traffic control and modernizing the air traffic control system and hiring more air traffic controllers. Where does this shutdown leave that effort, and what do you have underway to help mollify these problems?
It actually didn't. The shutdown hasn't hampered those efforts at all. And Secretary Duffy and the president are pushing through that. And we found that $12.5 billion to as a down payment, I guess you might say,
Yep.
To get this started. And that's actually going to cover all of the new radar sets and arrays. It's going to cover all the telecommunications, all the ground surveillance equipment that we're going to do. The goal is to have this done within 3.5 years. The administrator has set that goal. We have to do some permitting things to be able to meet that. But Duffy and the president they are committed to this. And I've never seen a secretary and a president so engaged in such a specific issue as modernizing our air traffic control system. So if there's one good thing that comes out of what happened at DCA, it's going to be this.
And the shutdown, we're now in day 35, this is longer, or tied for as long, I guess, as the 2018-2019 shutdown. My view is these shutdowns rarely work. They rarely achieve the end of that the instigating party is seeking. When do you think the narrative seems to have taken hold that it's this week? Do you have that sense from your point of view?
That's what I'm hearing. And there's so much pressure being brought to bear to the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, pilots unions, all of these groups,
the airlines
all coming
too,
in
by
now.
the way.
Yeah, absolutely. They're coming in now. In fact, the United CEO called me yesterday to tell me that they issued a statement. they're pushing hard, and there's a lot of pressure out there to end this. And it is frustrating from the standpoint that it is a clean CR. That opens the government. Then we can negotiate these spending bills and get through all of these sticky points that we have.
Yeah, so let's talk about FEMA, which is a major issue. Also something that the president has probably talked more about, FEMA reform and FEMA's state and the administration than most presidents in the past. You've said FEMA's in serious need of reform, and that the federal process is too slow, complicated, and disconnected from realities on the ground. Give us your pitch.
So this will be the most comprehensive FEMA reform since Hurricane Katrina. And FEMA it's broken. The president knows it's broken. So we're instituting some real reforms in there to make changes. We're going to put it back up to a cabinet level position to make them answerable to the president, whoever that may be. Moving forward, they've gotten too far away from that accountability. The next thing we're going to do is, you've got this system of when you apply for aid, it goes back and forth, and agency to agency, and we're eliminating all that. We're going to do upfront project grants, and we're going to, and what the president likes to say too, we're going to put the states in charge with the federal government's assistance. We're going to put it back to the states. They have the best. The more local you can get those recovery efforts, the better off and the more accountable they are. And then it also streamlines the process of application, one-page application, rather than this process of, again, back and forth and waiting and waiting and waiting. And then it depoliticizes it. No more will you be able to, folks be able to overlook this house because they've got a Democrat sign in their yard or a Republican sign in their yard. And we saw that happen in North Carolina. And so we're going to depoliticize the process, and it's going to be good for the agency.
Why is it better to have the FEMA administrator in the cabinet and not under DHS? What does that help? Because
it makes him responsible to the president himself, one person. And it makes that accountability stronger.
And so you said, you just alluded to this, and you said in the past that FEMA is falling through the cracks in many cases, the agency is. What are you hearing from communities, from local governments about the challenges they face with this structure?
Frustration, that's what you hear.
Yep.
There's a lot of frustration out there from communities, and just the process. And a lot of these communities are just small. The mayor is a part-time job, and it makes it very tough to be able to navigate this incredible red tape. And we have tried to do FEMA reform bills before, and all that happens is it gets worse and worse. More bureaucratic maze to go through, and more red tape to have to jump through, and it's a problem.
And you talk about how co-ops and electric utilities and the like fit into this process and fit in with this kind of effort.
Well, the REAs were a very big part of coming up with this solution and the reform bill, and Jim Matheson and his team spent a lot of time with us working through this. But one of the big things is the interest. So if the co-op borrows money to help jumpstart some assistance, disaster assistance, this clarifies that the interest is going to be reimbursed. And that was one of the biggest things that the co-ops needed, and which we've got in this bill.
And okay, so let's talk about your work. I mean, the House is one entity in Congress, and you have to get this through the Senate, get to the president's desk. Talk about where things stand with the Senate.
So I think things are good with the Senate on this. It was a very bipartisan bill that came out. I think we only had 3 votes in committee.
Yep.
Or 3 no votes in committee against it. So it's very bipartisan. We've got people on both sides of the aisle bought into this process, and so I think that puts a lot of pressure on the Senate as well. And once it crosses the floor of the House, it's going to be very bipartisan as well. But I don't think we'll have problems with the Senate.
And the White House is bought into this. You've been coordinating
Absolutely.
With the White House.
The president knows that FEMA's broken, and he has been very engaged in this.
And is in favor of having the FEMA administrator in the cabinet, in your view? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Let us talk for a minute about the highway bill, which is an overarching. something that you're very interested in for reasons that, and I think you said backstage there were 11, you've had 55, give the stat again.
Since 1956, we'd had 11 highway bills, and I will have been a part of writing 5 of those.
That's a lot.
Yep.
That's a lot. And 2 members of the class of 2000 here, so you've both been involved in voting on these. Let's talk about what you're seeking to achieve in the highway bill.
So this is going to be the most important highway bill that we have seen since 1956, and the reason for that is because never have we had a time where the need is so great, but the resources are so small. The highway trust fund is diminishing, and we've got to rebuild that. We got to fix that. We have so many vehicles on the road that's no longer paying for the use of that road. And you know, I'm a small government conservative, and I don't like taxes. But one thing I do believe, is user fees. If you're going to use government-owned infrastructure, then you should have to pay for it. And we have vehicles on the road that are getting a free ride. They are not paying for the use of that road. EVs, then you have hybrids that are getting better and better all the time. So right now let's just look at Amazon. They've got 25,000 EVs on the road right now, and within the next 5 years, they want to have 100,000 EVs. So, you know, you think about it, you can order something from Amazon on Sunday, and you have it by Monday afternoon. It comes up in a EV, and they didn't pay anything for the use of any of that infrastructure to be able to get that package to you. Or it comes with a drone. In some communities, they're having drone deliveries. Didn't pay for the use of that airspace coming through. So we've got to fix that. And you know, if you think about it, government does 2 things very well: nothing and overreact. One thing government doesn't
Copy and paste that. That's going to be a new Republican talking point here. Yeah.
One thing that government doesn't do well is anticipate or contemplate. And I want to put a highway bill together that addresses the next 20 years of issues within the transportation system rather than overreacting to the last 10 years. And that's what we have to do. We can't imagine what it's going to look like in 20 years. We're going to we've already got driverless trucks, driverless cars, driverless airplanes. That technology is going to explode, and we have to anticipate where that technology is taking us and put together a bill that addresses it.
And something that electric cooperatives are very interested in, and a lot of people are interested in across the energy field and across the transportation field is permitting reform. And I wonder if that has a place in the highway bill.
It does, and we're going to have a pretty strong permitting reform title in the highway bill. That is what it's not so much inflation, which is a part of it, or even with some of the tariffs. The problem is permitting. Projects take forever just to even turn a shovel of dirt. And we've got to speed that process up, because once you put the money out to the states or issue a grant for a project, whatever the case may be, and then it takes 7 years to start turning dirt on that project, well, that cost has just escalated as a result. We have to speed that process up.
Well, let me just ask one more question on co-ops. I mean, just looping back to FEMA for a second, just crossed my mind. I mean, the process, you've identified the FEMA process as too slow and complicated for co-ops when they're going through the reimbursement process. How will the FEMA effort help rectify that?
Well, obviously, with our streamlining and everything that we are doing, it's going to rectify that in a huge way. Instead of, again, that back and forth, agency to agency, cross-agency jurisdictions. They've got to get each other's permission before they can move forward, and it's just an outrageously overburdensome process. So streamlining it's going to make all the difference.
Just back to, and returning to the highway bill here for a second, a lot of people have said that this will be the most important highway bill in a generation. you said backstage your priority is highways, roads, and bridges. I mean, is that what this is going to really be limited to?
It's going to be a traditional highway bill. That means building roads and bridges, laying asphalt, pouring concrete. We're not going to be spending money on murals and train stations or bike paths or walking paths. We're going to spend money on traditional infrastructure. That's roads and bridges.
And when do you see this getting started? When do you see that effort beginning?
So the shutdown has changed that a little bit, but we intend to mark the bill up. So. We intend to mark the bill. We're continuing to work. The committee's continuing to put it together, but we intend to mark up at the first part of next year and have it off the House floor sometime around spring.
And how do electric co-ops fit into your transportation framework, especially around grid resilience, utility relocation, and infrastructure and dependencies?
Well, obviously they have a role to play in terms of that process, and when it comes to changing highways or moving highways or whatever the case may be, or right-of-ways, using the right-of-way for modern telecommunications and that sort of thing. Obviously they have a role, and a big role actually.
And the question we always have about the highway bill when the highway bill comes up is the gas tax, and where does the gas tax go? Do you plan any changes on the gas tax? And you mentioned EVs, so I should ask, how do you handle EVs in this?
Right now, we're going to probably have a EV registration fee, and we're going to do one for hybrids too. My last proposal was $250 for EVs and $100 for hybrids. This will be the first new money in the trust fund in 30 years. And we have to address that. Again, if we don't, then we're not going to be able to pay for this infrastructure. We're not going to be able to pay for our roads and bridges. And if you're using those roads and bridges, you should be paying into that process. That is the bottom line. That's how it works. And the nice thing about my world in transportation is we have all these trust funds, and they're true trust funds. The Highway Trust Fund, Aviation Trust Fund, Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund, the Inland Waterways Trust Fund. The list goes on and on and on, but if you're using that infrastructure, then you should be paying for it. No free rides.
When do you, on this timeline, so when do you think this needs to pass the House floor?
Say again.
When do you think it needs to get through the House floor?
We're shooting for next spring. Yep.
Next spring?
Sometime next spring.
And how is the coordination with your Senate counterparts?
That'll put a little bit of pressure on them, I think, to get the bill done. And they are committed on the Senate side to getting it done. The two jurisdictions will be Shelley Moore Capito and Ted Cruz.
Another classmate of yours,
yes,
Shelley Moore Capito,
absolutely.
And Mr. Matheson's.
So they will. They're committed to getting the bill done, and as well. And so then we'll go to conference, work out the differences.
We all know that bipartisanship has been somewhat hard to come by in the last couple of years, and especially in this Congress. You have a pretty good relationship with your ranking member, Rick Larson, also a classmate of yours, I believe. Man, we have a lot of movement in this class of 2000. You work very well together with him. I mean, I think an EV registration fee and a hybrid fee, those are going to be difficult things for you to sell Democrats on, I would imagine. But why are you confident that this could get done in a bipartisan way?
That's the way our committee works. We passed a great FAA reauthorization. The largest bill that came out of the last Congress last year, and we did it in 387 votes on the floor of the House. And we'll run the highway bill the very same way. We're going to bring common sense people together and work through the problems. It'll be a member-driven bill, so those ideas and thoughts will all be in there. Everyone will have a stake in the game, so to speak. And by the way, we had 11,000 requests from both stakeholders and members in this highway bill, which we've been sorting through and going through.
And requests for funding.
And so we will, we'll incorporate those into the legislation.
Sam Graves, the chair who did get a waiver of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. And now I'd like to welcome to the stage Jim Matheson. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
this is more about the class of 2000 than you've probably heard in 25 years.
Man, I'm impressed. You've worked that in well.
I did. I tried, and that was just a stat that I learned backstage. So this is really me on my toes. Okay, so let's talk about this. Just for background, you represented Utah in the House for I think 15 years, 14 years.
14 years. Yeah.
14 years, and Utah has an interesting political climate right now. We're not going to get into that. That's an event for another time that we could have an entire event about. So give us some background. What makes electric co-ops different from other electric utilities?
Well, electric co-ops are owned by the consumers that they serve. It's a cooperative, and this goes back to when they started in the 1930s and 40s. And so there are no shareholders. They are owned by the consumers. They're governed by the consumers. The consumers elect the boards of these co-ops. And so everything that has a financial impact on the electric cooperative, it all goes to the consumer bill. We're non-for-profit. In fact, any excess revenues get returned to our consumers. If any of you are part of REI, you know you get your rebate from REI. That's how co-ops are structured. So we're very consumer-focused. In fact, we're solely consumer-focused, and that's the way the financial risk is associated with electric co-ops as well.
It's amazing. Your trade association, you told me this backstage, is one of, if not the largest, certainly one of the largest in Washington, which is amazing to think about, considering how massive, how many massive trade associations are swarming around DC. And electric co-ops are frequently on the front lines of disaster response and recovery. Could you talk about how co-ops work with FEMA to get power back on after disasters?
Well, first of all, we're directly on the front lines because we serve 56% of all the land mass in America.
That's a lot.
Just by definition, we got lines covering a lot of territory, so we got more exposure when natural disasters happen. And years ago, public policy made the decision for these non-for-profit utilities that are in the hardest, most expensive areas to serve in America, that there would be FEMA reimbursement to pay a portion, not necessarily 100%, cost share, of recovery for damage to electric cooperative infrastructure from a natural disaster. So this has been a critical relationship between electric cooperatives and FEMA that's existed for a long time. As I said, if anything happens to financial impact to an electric cooperative, it all goes to the consumer. Can't put it in the rate base, can't have shareholders help pay for it. And so if a disaster happens and we work closely with FEMA, it's been a critical way to make sure that those people living in that cooperative service territory are not subject to a huge increased expense to pay for the recovery. And like I said earlier, these are these sparsely populated, wide open spaces. So you got a lot of electric infrastructure, but not so many people to spread that cost across.
Yep.
And so that's why this FEMA relationship is really important for electric cooperatives.
So talk about it. You heard what Mr. Graves said about his FEMA reform effort, which you undoubtedly, that's not the first time you've heard about what he's doing on FEMA. What are some of your priorities? And you have a unique point of view, because not only are you a trade association leader, but you also were in the institution for a long time, and you understand perhaps better than anybody, because you were around in a very heavy legislating period of time on Capitol Hill. Mm-hmm. Talk about what you think the dynamics are in getting a FEMA reform effort across the finish line.
Well, I'll start by saying that Chairman Graves, Sam, has done a great job of getting off on the right foot in terms of this is, as he said, it's a bipartisan bill. Yep. And he and Ranking Member Larson and their staffs have worked together to help draft this bill. And the proof's in the pudding with the committee vote where you only had 3 people vote no. So I really appreciate that. This is a substantive effort to try to do the right thing. It's not a partisan issue. And you don't see that a lot in town these days, so I like that. This is a big issue for us because FEMA has not worked as well as it should. You've heard it from Sam earlier. You've heard the president say this. FEMA needs to be reformed, and we feel that. In fact, in my time heading up NRECA, the biggest complaint I hear from our members are complaints about their frustrations in dealing with FEMA because of inconsistent processes, different applications in different locations, slow walking any permit applications, getting different answers from different people. A lot of things that we can fix. These are fixable items, and this legislation goes a long way to doing that.
And what has been, you talked, I mean, everyone is talking about how FEMA is kind of a bureaucratic nightmare, and I think we always are reminded of that in the wake of natural disasters, right? When we turn on the TV and we hear from people who are, out of their homes, or there's no electricity, or whatever the disaster may be. What about FEMA has made it so difficult to manage, do you think?
Well, I think that there are a few items. One is just inconsistency in terms of information, in terms of decision-making, in terms of process.
Yep.
You may go through a utility may go through a FEMA event one season and have one process happen,
Yep.
and it happens the next year, and it isn't the same anymore. So it's very frustrating in that sense. A lot of delays in terms of making decisions. And there are factors that this legislation really is going to help fix. For example, under current law, you have to rebuild the system in exactly the same way it was before the storm. Well, if you got a line going through an area that floods frequently, you may want to move that line a couple of 100 yards one way or the other. Can't do that now, according to FEMA. This legislation fixes that. So it's one of the aspects of this bill that's really interesting about building in a way where you're adding resiliency to the system so it doesn't happen again with the next storm. So those are some of the frustrations we faced.
And that leads me to my next question. Is that kind of the chief concern of co-ops when working with FEMA, that there's just not a lot of flexibility and you hear this all the time, FEMA has to, when we restore areas after storms, they have to be like they were before. What are some of the other hurdles that co-ops face when working through disasters?
We wait a long time, and as Sam Graves mentioned earlier, we wait a long time, and co-ops borrow a bunch of money to help do the repairs right away, and some co-ops are waiting 3-4 years. We got a co-op, Jeff Davis co-op in Louisiana, that's paid over $15 million of interest. That may not be a lot of money to a big investor-owned utility. It's a lot of money for an electric cooperative. And so this legislation says, if you're going to take a long time, we're going to reimburse interest in a consistent way, because here's the funny thing, FEMA has done that for some co-ops and not for others.
And that's kind of what Mr. Graves was talking about, is treating people with equity. I mean, do you see that a lot, that people that certain entities are treated with better respect?
And I don't think it's I don't think it's singling out for a certain attribute of a co-op. It's just managed and administered in a different way across the board. So I think this legislation addresses that interest issue. It also requires payment within 120 days. So we may not need the interest recovery as much because they've streamlined the process. Say, no, we've streamlined it, but you got to do a payout within 120 days of application for the electric co-op. That's a big deal for us. The last part of this legislation I should mention that's really interesting is that FEMA, in addition to, I talked about, let's build it back in a way that's more resilient, not as it exactly was. FEMA also has a program for pre-disaster mitigation funding. And that's an existing program, but this bill carves out 20% of that only to go to rural and economically distressed areas, so we can use funding before the storm hits to build more hardened assets. And because electric cooperatives serve 92% of all the persistent poverty counties in America, we kind of hit both those check boxes of rural and economically distressed. So we can get in front of this so when the storm happens, we don't have the lights go out in as many cases. So that's the last part of this bill that I would mention that's really important for us.
So let's localize this. You guys are obviously supporters of this effort. How will this help people in these communities that are relying on co-ops for electricity? What should consumers and people in communities, what will they see? What will be different in their lives if this bill passes?
Well, at the front end, if we make sure that it's done in a timely way, interest reimbursed, it means that the consumers are not going to get stuck having to pay for all this. That's a big deal for them. Number two, if we have a more predictable process, I'd like to think it would allow us to make more investments in resilience so the power doesn't go out as often during these natural disasters. Look, disasters are going to happen. The lights are going to go out. We can't stop it 100% of the time.
You can't?
But we can move the needle on that.
Yeah.
And this legislation gives us more tools to do that. So that's what consumers can expect.
And I mean, how urgent is this? I mean, we oftentimes, when things come up on Capitol Hill, we hear that, this needs to get done by X date. I mean, I assume you want this done this Congress. What is the level of urgency?
Well, I think that you want the old cliche, strike while the iron's hot. We've got momentum right now behind this bill. So that's why this is so important to us. Of course we want this to happen. We want it to happen yesterday. But I do think that the fact that we've got this bipartisan legislation that's come together in a really solid way gives us a sense that, man, because we all know, everyone in this room knows this, it's not easy to pass anything through Congress these days.
No.
It's really hard.
No.
And yet there's a path for this one. And so that's why we're really excited. We think the opportunity exists today, and it is going to make a difference. It's going to create greater certainty for electric cooperatives. It's going to allow them to make investments that are hopefully going to reduce the number of outages. This is a big deal for our membership. And I can tell you, we did a little research. And of the 435 congressional offices, districts in America, 433 have had a FEMA event in the last 15 years.
That's an unbelievable statistic.
Yeah, we associate this with hurricanes or the big storms. It happens everywhere. Wildfires, ice storms, derecho, tornado, flooding.
Yep.
So this is a big deal for all members of the electric cooperative community. We've mobilized all of our members in terms of advocating for this bill. We're real excited about it.
Yeah, that's an amazing statistic, because we think about FEMA events as being cataclysmic events, and it could be a snowstorm where something happens. Jim Matheson, the head of NRECA, thank you so much for joining me. And I won't ask you to name every member of the class of 2000. I think we've gotten through a lot of them, and I am proud of that for my house as a House history buff. Thank you so much to NRECA for making this event possible. We appreciate it. Stay tuned to punchbowl.news for more events and more happenings. Have a great day, everyone, and stay safe.